new business for those minutes, we have it down as motion to table. That should be moved to approve.
Yeah, I changed it on the, when he's getting ready to sign, but yeah, I had to change it in the packet.
Okay.
Try to make me look bad.
Take a motion to approve as amended.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next up, public comments. Going once, going twice.
It's wet.
Next up, approval of the bills list.
Pay the bills.
I think there was, I don't know, Raquel, do you want to say anything about the park board? I think we currently have, what, $2,200 outstanding bills, so
For this month?
for this month, and I think the current balance on the operations account was 900 and something. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
it's about $995.
I went in earlier and talked to Joe regarding that. We've got to figure something else out as far as money coming out of operations. I think we're gonna have maybe the attorney and have a meeting here soon.
Okay. But for now, we'll need to, if those are gonna be paid now, we need to take that out of the general fund. And just let the code, I didn't write down the balance, but like here we were around 60-something thousand.
Yeah.
Motion to approve.
I make a motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any folks paid? Old business, none? New business, discussion, consideration, and possible action regarding Diamond Computers quotes.
Yeah, what that is the backup software for both servers, the police department and city hall. It's something we need. I mean, it's a yearly contract. The only decision we need to know is if you guys want to do the 1 year for $1,369 or the 3 year subscription for $3,907. But this is actually the software that we use to back up all the information on the servers.
And we house those here, they're not, or I mean, they're.
Yeah, the servers are really good. Yeah. And this is the backup software to back up all the information.
They're not giving us less of a discount.
Yeah, that's what I was doing.
But what's the chance of them raising their rate each year from next to the next?
Or machine breaking. Do we have, wasn't there something about our software, some, are we, how current are we?
$200.
It seemed like a year ago or so, they were saying there was something that was,
Yeah, the server.
yeah, that we were, so,
Software, yeah.
I mean, I didn't know if this is, if we have to change hardware, is that license gonna move over? at
Yeah.
Additional charge, or?
Yeah, like I said, it's just a system, the software we use to back up all the system and store it, so, yeah, it would be with it.
If we do the 3 year, we pay it off in 10 days, we get a 2% discount on top of that. Is that correct?
But there's a zero in that box.
Yeah.
That's basically,
Oh.
It does look like that's their normal practice, but in this case, it doesn't look like.
Well, everything's.
Of course, yes, a zero is even on this invoice too.
Yeah, everything's zero.
Yeah, they're just like the.
Well,
choice
it's
of-
also be 121 days late, there's no penalty either.
Yeah, correct.
So do we want to see if they'll give us the 2% and do a 3 year, or do we wanna-
I think that would be the most economical.
Yeah, let's get that working.
all in favor?
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? All right, 3 years and we'll ask for the 2%.
Okay.
Next up, discussion, consideration, and possible action regarding the new records management system for the police department. I sent you my questions earlier this week.
Yeah, about the contract
Yeah.
with, we don't have a contract with them, it's year to year.
Okay. And when's the current one out?
We paid in April, so we're good till
November.
6 months from now.
Okay.
November is up again.
Now, my only concern was I just didn't want to be locked in with one and then them tell us that we couldn't change or something, or paint both or what have you. That was really my biggest concern. Otherwise, I didn't see anything. When I looked at the savings on the one, it kind of washed out the other, so. You think it's better to use and faster?
The Central Square it's more user-friendly, it's got more options, and Jackson County is switching to that. So when they do that, we'll lose some of the services they do for us now, we'll lose some of those because we wouldn't be on the same system. So that was the reason I came up with it to begin with. But when I got to looking at it, I got the quote from the company, the $4,700 a year compared to $22,000 a year, that seemed like
Looked nice.
a good idea at that point.
Yeah, I remember my other question was on the court side, and I think Joe, you sent me
Yeah.
something on that, but
Yeah.
there'd be, we could, how do we do that?
The court side, Central Square is developing a part of this software that will do the same thing ITI does, which would go right to the show me courts. But it's in development now. It should be done here in the next few months. Until that time, we would just have to pay, which we've already paid.
Right, we're good till
Uh,
October.
We've already paid 6 months for the court as well. I'm assuming we paid them at the same time. So we're good till November. The only thing that we need that old system for is just so they can get these old warrants put into the new system. So that would give them 6 months to be able to get all those warrants transferred in. Because they have to be, right now they have to be done manually. And that's kind of it's gonna be more work for the girls, but after that's over, everything should be just as we operate now, except easier to navigate through the system.
And of course, girls are all working on that process right now. I don't know how many ones they got to switch over, but they're all looking on it slowly.
But then sound like they have any issues, as long as the judge is good with it, I.
Yeah.
don't have any issues with it. Any other questions? Is there a motion to move forward?
Motion to proceed.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Sounds like we're on our way to a new system. Next up, discussion, consideration, and possible action regarding the sewer system rates analysis and improvements to the wastewater treatment plant. We got a couple of guests here this evening. So, we I'll kind of start it off and then hand it off. We've been talking for some time about making some modifications to the existing system and what we need to do. And Mr. Benson was gracious enough to kind of do a revenue and expense analysis, and I had Natalie do one too, so we kind of have a couple of different views of the same data, or similar data, not the same data. So the big thing was is we know that we don't have enough money on hand to finish the project. We know that we're getting love letters from DNR every year telling us that we're not managing the wastewater outflow. At some point, they're going to start fining us, I think, up to $1,000 a day. And we've been telling them, good faith, that we're trying to get better, but it takes time and money, and we may have time, but we don't have a lot of money. So I'll again let Mr. Benson explain, but I think we are looking at debt payments around $110,000, and how do we get from where we are to where we need to be? So.
Yeah, I think the mayor covered it pretty high level. I did provide Joe a little letter that I think was in your packets. Certainly, if you haven't already read it, please read it before the next time you all get together to actually discuss possible rate ordinance. But the main point here is, on top of the fact that you are all looking at possible sewer projects coming up here, and you need to be able to pay for those projects. And if we're looking at financing, you have to pay the debt payments on those. That would be approximately $110,000. However, in addition to that,
Was that every 6 months or every year?
no, that's annualized.
Annualized.
In addition to that, currently, you guys went through what you all remember. I was not here at that time, but you went through the process of increasing water rates, and you know how difficult a process that was. But it's proving to be a very good decision on your all's point. However, what it means is that water system is now currently subsidizing sewer system. On top of capital expenditures that need to be completed, you know, per DNR's requests, expenses in the last 3 to 4 years, you know, since COVID, have skyrocketed. And that means you're now in a situation where, you know, as outlined in my letter, you're technically operating the sewer system in a deficit. Now, there's a little bit of estimation going on there on sewer expenses and revenues coming in, but it's fairly clear that your water rates are subsidizing sewer. And so what you want is really, you want to make sure you're being fiscally responsible in operating the sewer system. Although it is a combined water and sewage system of the city, you want it to be able to stand on its own. And so in this case, when hopefully here in the next few months, we're looking at going and talking to investors, we want to be able to show, you know, Bank XYZ that the city is committed to making these future debt payments, and specifically the sewer project and the sewer system as a whole will be able to afford not only the debt payments, but also the continued operation in an efficient manner. So all that is to say, all that said, we're looking at a rate ordinance. It is substantial. I understand that. However, I think it's to be as good a decision as what you want to do. And that's the point. I'm going to shut up and answer your guys' questions on it.
The question, I apologize for not thinking of this when we spoke last, but I was looking at the rate table. Do we know how many, did you have access to data that would show what our current utilization rate is in each tier so that we could estimate what the total revenue impact would be on that? You know, that we've got X number of tier 4 users, this many tier 3, 2, 1, so forth, so that we know what the total revenue impact would be.
Yeah, and Joe provided that data to me a while back. It's going to take my, I've got a second here to get it, if I can't get it. I'm operating with a very slow system and slow connection.
Welcome to Buckeye.
Well, I was just gonna say, you know, the sewer system, we charge $17 with the base rate, and then everybody, no matter what water you use, is $2.17 for 1,000 gallons. So you can be a heavy user or not, you still pay the same amount. So what I suggested when we tried to accomplish was using the same tier rate that we use for the water road. The lower end users are not affected as much. It's gonna be affected.
It's still a substantial increase.
But at least your low end and the elderly people won't be hit as hard as the more larger users.
So currently, your average tier 1 user uses about 1,100 gallons, is our estimate. Your average tier 2 user uses 3,500 gallons, tier 3, 6,500 gallons, and tier 4, 22,000 gallons.
Do we know about how many of each tier?
So approximately 330 users in that tier 1, 440 users in that tier 2, 125 users in tier 3, and 70 in tier 4.
I'm sorry, could you repeat those numbers again, please?
300,
330?
330, 440, 125, 70. I'm rounding off a couple here and there.
So ballpark tier 1 is gonna increase on the sewer from 17 to
From 17 to 27
27.
in year 1 and 30 in year 2.
And then tier 2,
Tier 2, I gotta get my,
It's gonna be about 3,500 gallons. So it'll be 375 plus 325, right? But 375.
yeah, 30 is the minimum in 2025. And so, yeah, it would take a tier 1 user at 2,000 gallons. So that you're maxing that tier 1 out, but tier 1 user from $21 approximately to $37.
tier 1 is from 21 to 37,
By 2025.
and tier 2 is gonna be what?
$25 today approximately to $46.
46? We're gonna be real popular.
Yep.
Yeah, the other question, so what would that total annual collections on that be based on that model?
Yeah. So currently, in fiscal year 2023, it was a bit higher, but 335,000 was the estimated
That's
annual
correct.
collection there. Based on our model, you bring in about $315,000 with where rates are currently. This would take it up to $560,000. So you are overshooting a little bit in the first couple years to make sure you have the ability in year 3 to borrow money for the rest of the project, because we're doing the project in 2 phases.
315 right now.
I'm sorry?
We're currently about 315.
Yeah, 350,000, yes.
I'll say Natalie, I had her pull what she looked at, and there was some weird stuff in there on the expense side because we bought those agitator, we'd had to replace some pumps, and there was like a one-time $60,000 expense. But it does look like we're missing by about $8,000 a month. So that's about $96,000 a year, and then you take and add $111,000 on top of that.
Yeah.
So, just to cover your debt service, so at the other end, I did ask Mr. Benson, I'm sure that we could take that down a little bit here and now, but he had it, the model initially went out for like 10 years with annual rate increases on it. I really was not a fan of going out that far. Let's let each council have an opportunity to put it before, they can vote. If we need the money, we'll vote to get more money, but to just take it and, we let's face it, we can always find a way to spend money. But let's make sure that we actually can define for the voters what it is that we want to spend it on, and then during the campaign, we can say, hey, I want to spend it on this, and they can say, well, I'm voting for you, or they can say, well, we don't want that, I'm voting for the other guy. That's me. You guys can say, no, we want to look at CPI tied rates, and we'll vote on whether to do that or not. I'm just sharing my bias.
I would, in general, I say this to all our clients, I would encourage whatever rate ordinance you all decide to follow through with, to include some sort of language in there providing you all the authority without, a full-fledged new ordinance to raise rates every year by some inflation measure. The only reason I say that is because a lot of the reason most communities these days are in this exact position, whether or not they have a project coming, down the line that they're trying to prepare for, is because of the fact that for a decade or so, we had near zero inflation. And so you got to these, you get to these discussions, and we haven't raised water rates in 14 years. Well, yeah, you didn't have to, because your chemical costs didn't go up 60% every year for 3 years. But guess what happened since COVID? sewer bill 50 cents, that 50 cents annually goes a long way. I hate to say this, but there are a lot of communities out there and water districts out there that would be in a lot better position today if they had just bitten the, bite the bullet, take a little heat here and there, and increase rates a percent or two every single year. But that's just my recommendation to ease any future concerns.
Understood. I'm still not a fan, but.
But-
That's fine.
There, ARPA funds, so do we get any more ARPA funds or?
No, we've been rescued. We're-
That's our rescue? I mean, I'm not a huge fan of this doubling, because it looks like it's a double. Like, I mean, I was one of the proponents against the original, I get infrastructure needs money, like I hear this loud and clear. But we're in a tight situation here in our community, like we're in a more lower, income base. I mean, that's gonna be a huge struggle for a lot of people.
Well, that's one of the reasons why I'm saying I'd not sign, I mean, again, I don't get to say I'm signing off or not, but I would not advocate for the ongoing increases until we know we need it. But in the here and now, I mean, we're at risk with the DNR to tell us our plant is, well, we know our plant's not in compliance. And
Why didn't we know that we were hemorrhaging money before now? Like, how come that wasn't caught?
I think largely because we combined water and sewer, and the water was surplus enough that it was just kind of hiding the deficit.
That and, fiscal audits, fiscal year audits have, are already delayed, usually 6 to 9 months.
When we were catching this though, you caught it 4 months ago, you noticed that 10 grand was leaving each month, and there's this aha moment. I mean, we were losing money. I get audits, I get all that. When did, okay, I don't know what I'm saying. It's a lot.
It is, and I mean, we had a lot, part of that is because we've had some one-time payments in there, again, we had to replace those pumps.
Right.
It seems like every year we're replacing 2 pumps,
Yeah.
and that's $50,000 or $60,000. And I don't know, I would assume that with this new system, and Mr. Ross is here, is kind of our technical expert on that side, I believe. Would this somehow decrease the burden on those pumps? Are we still going to have some of the issues related around maintaining the same agitation and what have you that we got now?
Yeah, the pumps themselves are not going to change in any drastic measure. You're going to reduce the amount of sludge depth in there, so that's going to help a little.
Decrease the load.
So it'll take a little bit of pressure off of them, but for all practical purposes, there's not really a substantial change there. What this would do, the exhibit that you've got there in front of you shows, instead of right now the sludge has to be pumped out on a regular basis, and it's taken and land applied. That's becoming a bigger issue every year for everybody in the Midwest. DNR is getting a lot tighter on the regulations for the land application. More testing and environmental sensitivity, all those things. And there's less people doing it. So add all those pieces together, that dollar value goes up. And this system is similar to what is in Blue Springs, also in Warrensburg. We essentially pump the sludge to these basins and rotate through them. It's I'll say a glorified sand filter. You've got sand and gravel, and then you grow these reeds that grow 10 or 15 feet tall. The reeds actually use up the nutrients. Once a year, you light them on fire, you burn them down, and grow back the next year. That's the majority of the maintenance for it. Blue Springs went, I think, almost these 14 or 15 years without ever having to replenish the soil and the sand. So that would be your expense, your piping and all that, it's gonna be there for a while. So we just have to pump sludge out to these, and it would rotate through the basins. So you pump one for a few weeks, you then you do the next one, then you do the next one, you cycle them through. And so others that we've seen have been 10 to 20 years lifespan without really having any kind of extensive maintenance that's necessary. So the payback for these are pretty quick.
You know, you guys remember currently, we got a tank that we send all the sludge to, and we gotta have that tank pumped at least, we do it twice a year, but we really
I think
can
we
do it
budgeted
more.
quarterly this
And
year.
it costs us $17,000 every time we pump this out and put it on the van.
Yeah, that's realistically, that tank's not large
Yeah.
enough because you should be able to handle a year's worth. So that ends up building up in the rest of the system. And then we end up with ammonia issues and disinfection issues, and it affects all the rest of the plant as well as the discharge quality. So this should take that pressure off of the plant and give the operators some flexibility to manage that appropriately. Other questions?
And this was a two-phase, kind of first get the ditches, get the stuff pumped in there, and then we would look at the other, because you said there was, because I think we're dealing with phosphates or nitrates, I can't remember this, like initially, and then we'd have to deal with the other one.
Right,
Next
so
phase.
right now, the ammonia limit's gotten a little tighter. And a lot of that is in relation to the sludge depth and how old it is. So we can get that out to these reed beds very quickly, so it doesn't have to build up in the other tanks. That should help the ammonia immediately. The next permit cycle, we expect to be hit with phosphorus requirements. We've been testing for them over the last several years. Pretty much every place in the country. Missouri is one of the later ones to implement some of these standards, but phosphorus and nitrogen limits, ammonia limits, and the creek that you discharge in is considered, drawing a blank for the word, but I won't say, I didn't say contaminated, take that off, but it's impaired. That's the official word. So,
Because of the outflow, or because it comes dirty to us and we just don't make it better?
yeah, because the analysis has to be, you take samples of the water before your discharge
Upstream.
enters, and then you take samples after, and you can't negatively impair that stream. When you're dumping into the Missouri River, like Lexington, not such a big deal because it's already pretty impaired. But the smaller the stream gets, the tighter those limits can get, because you're putting most of the flow into it. So,
I do have a question. Is that estimated payment, that 111,000, is that only phase one, or is that also phase two?
That is only phase one.
Okay.
Phase two would take it up to, I think it's just under 300,000. And that's assuming, I could get it, some level of grant funding through the SRF program.
so we have applied through SRF for the larger project. You're not obligated to do anything with that. It's just a process to go through to get on their intended use plan. So you're on the list. The fact that you have bonds that are already passed makes that process a lot faster. Usually people have to go back through a vote of the public. You've already got that bonding authority, so that helps speed that process up. And our intent would be, so comparatively speaking today, private funding for 20 years, the interest rate's a little bit higher than it is to go with SRF. SRF has more hurdles to jump through. There's more regulations, more checks and balances that we have to follow through. So the end result is a little bit higher, but the interest rate is quite a bit lower. And it also has the ability, if there's grant money available when we apply, I'll say between 20 and 50% grant money is pretty common for these kind of projects. So if we could get you know, we'll hope and pray for 50%. There's no crystal ball out there that tells us what that number is until we get finished with all that application and we get all our documents in. But it's a possibility you could get 50% of that in a grant.
And I'm here because I'm going to say I think, I don't know that that's true. On the legal admin and engineering, we've been paying a little bit towards that already, haven't we? I don't know, is that 375 what's left, or that was the total cost and we've engaged on some of that along the way?
We've done very little. You know, we did the initial report to be able to apply for the money, but that's already done and paid for. So
this would be what's left.
That would be, yeah, to actually do the design and construction administration. If we use SRF money, we're required to do all of the construction administration. Using private funds, we can back some of that off. So different requirements, different rules, and so we'll work with you along the way. Those are budgetary numbers. We typically, by the time we're done, we're 10% less than those numbers. But with the craziness as John has described, with fluctuation in prices, that's difficult to nail down these days.
It's best we prepare for high and be glad that it was low than
Yes.
get started and find we can't afford to finish.
Yeah, and kind of to that point, and I guess a little to what Jim was talking about, when you're looking at financing projects like this, you need two things. You need the authority to finance it with bonds. You can do lease purchase financing as well, which doesn't require a vote, but it's slightly higher interest rate. In this case, we have that authority already, so that's a checkbox. And then the second key item is you need to have the ability to pay the debts. And that's kind of what we're here discussing tonight, that second checkbox, to make sure that when we go out to any purchaser of the city's debt obligations, that they will have the assurances in their hand that the city is committed to making those debt payments. With where rates are currently, I could not, in good conscience, talk to a banker and say the city is bringing enough sewer revenue in to afford the debt payments that you're going to be requesting. So.
And that's one other thing, as we've talked to bankers, people investing, buying bonds, those kind of things, that phrase that says you will, at a minimum, increase your rates by the CPI index or something. That's one of the questions that have been coming back from those people to say, okay, what's assuring me I'm going to get my money?
Yeah, and more specifically, it's coming from the Department of Natural Resources in a lot of cases. So as much as, I would love to disagree with an entity that's giving, a client of mine 20-50% grant money, it's difficult to do so when they're the ones supplying that amount of funds. But they, in their financial modeling, where I would disagree and think we're not going to have 5% inflation for the next 6 years, that's what they're estimating in their models. And when you get into a discussion further on down the line with the Department of Natural Resources and your rates aren't in order, what we're having to deal with is the Department of Natural Resources telling our clients exactly how much they have to raise their rates, and they have to do it today. Because, and they have to do it enough to where in 5 years' time, based on some forecast that an accountant in the Department of Natural Resources made, with 5% inflation on expenses for the next 5 years, which is 30%. That's a lot. Is that going to keep happening? I certainly hope not. We'll be in a lot worse position as a country and an economy just in general if inflation stays that high. We'll have a lot more things to worry about. So if you delay too much of this and you have to get into a negotiation with the Department of Natural Resources on your own rates, it's going to be a much more conservative analysis.
One of the things and I just was scratching this out, I was listening, but also, it looks like, because if the payment's about $111,000, that's about $9,000 a month, just rounding. And we're missing by 18, we got about 1,100 house bills that we send out each month. So if we were to bump, it looks like we need to make $16 or $17 a month per household to make up the deficit and cover the debt service. Again, that's our numbers, not your numbers.
Yeah,
So that's
yeah,
the city's numbers. To Mr. Coley's point, I'm guessing DNR doesn't care how you get there as long as you get there. So if we were to leave tier 1 largely unaffected or have just the most de minimis rate increase and then backload that on 3, 4, and 5, or 2, 3, and 4, I guess, whichever way. I mean, is that, did
I don't
you care about that?
Nope.
Or?
I don't think an investor, DNR, no. If your intent is to try to minimize the effect on
Make it less regressive.
Yeah, on a 1,500 gallon user, absolutely. The difficult part to that, usually, you guys have, as we talked about, I mean, it's still a large percentage, but in order to, move the mark on revenues, usually that tier 1, proportion of revenues is high, just because of the fact that it's a large number of users.
Everybody clears tier 1.
Right, exactly. So, in this case, I can't remember the exact number, but it's 33.
330, yeah, 330, so about 33%.
So yeah, call it 35 or 30%. So 30% of your user base is in that tier 1. You can't just ignore it and leave rates where they are, because otherwise you're going to be, I mean, you can, and as an investor or anybody else would, as long as revenues are coming in to cover the debts, they're okay. But it makes it a lot more, it's the effect on the rest of the users will be much higher. If you were to have
DNR's rule of thumb, I've always been told, is that they want to see about at least 50% of your debt in your base. So they're guaranteed that that's going to come. But that's not always the way it's done at the end of the day, but that is one thing that they look at.
Yeah, because I mean, I mean, yeah, 70 out of 1,000 is all that we got it out. But I mean, the amount that they use is exponentially more than the tier 1. So
Correct.
and increasing the user, and that's kind of what tried to do with the tier charges, where we're going currently at a $2.15 flat charge for every user per 1,000 gallons. Excuse me. We're increasing that tier 1, yes, but we're increasing incrementally each tier from that to try to, I guess, put more of the onus on those large users. For instance, if you're talking about a 2,000 gallon user per month going from $2.15 to, I forgot what it was, $3.75,
no,
you're talking about $2-3 in an increase, and percentage-wise always makes things look much more difficult, but we're talking about a $2 to $3 increase a month for volume charge. But when you start getting into those 22,000 users, 50,000 gallon users, that's where that 2 to 3 per 1,000 gallon increase adds up. And so they might be a smaller portion of the total user base in numbers, but in volume, with your volume charge, that's what creates that larger effect. So you can see on I didn't put the percentages on there, but I tried to tier it a little bit to make it a little less. So in that first year, I think the increase on, we went through a couple iterations, but the increase on the tier 1 user is something like 45 to 50%. And then it increases from there to the tier 4 user is an increase of about 60% to try to kind of up that. And I could be a little off. Again, we've gone through a couple iterations, but I tried to put, again, more of the onus on those tier 3, tier 4 users.
Yeah, I see that looking at, I mean, what's interesting is that there's 70 people or 70 accounts in that.
Right.
And they'll generate 5 times the revenue of tier 1.
Right.
That 330, I just took 330 times the $37 in the first one, and then 70 times the $99 in the other one.
Yeah.
It's still crazy the leverage that you generate on the.
So Mayor Box, just, I want to understand this. So the current minimum for just to flush your toilet is $17 right now. Is that right?
That's my understanding.
Okay. And then the current minimum for, if you got a glass of water, is $21.30, right? For the.
That's on the, okay,
Tier 1.
yeah.
Yeah.
From 0 to 2,000 gallons, I believe. It's 20,000.
Right, so if, what we're proposing is to go up to $27 for the minimum for flushing your toilet, right? And then $33.50. I don't understand where the $3.25 comes into play here.
It's
Like,
per
where they-
1,000 gallon.
That's what they get charged per 1,000.
That's like, so if you use 5,000 gallons of water, 5,000 times that, $3 and something, so you pay $15 for that, plus your minimum charge.
Kind of like your taxes, you pay on the first dollar, you pay this much, the millionth dollar, you pay that much.
So we're gonna increase.
First $2,000, first 2,000 gallons would cost you $6.50, right? Because it's $3.25 a thousand. So it'd be $6.50 for the first 2,000.
Right.
But like, in current world, I guess it's $4.30 for the first 2,000.
But we're raising the minimums on both and then
Right.
adding an additional charge.
And then use, yes. And part of that's to take care of the disposables, the chemicals and what have you that goes into maintaining. Right.
I mean, like I said, I understand the infrastructure part. I really do.
I believe.
Comparatively speaking, has an unfortunate stance, as Jonathan has also, stand in front of several different communities in this conversation, and there's a lot of them that are pushing $80 to $100 for that same bill.
So at least some of it is pretty.
Yeah, you're
And
not alone in this
Yeah.
discussion.
we've got some clients are paying $150 just for their water, and then sewers on top of that.
But you're also talking about financial economics too, that though Lee Summit per capita, there's a lot more wealthier people there.
I'm talking Lexington, Wellington, Richmond.
You're talking the garden spot of Lafayette County.
Right.
Odessa, smaller water districts. So, yeah.
You're saying 150?
The water district in Peculiar and the city of Peculiar, which is not much bigger than you. It's $125 for a normal water user, just for water.
I can tell you, I just finished the financing in order to afford it, the city of Russellville had to increase their water and sewer bills. I think it's to nearly $160 for a 3,500 gallon user.
Where's that
Missing
at?
a little bit, but
Where was that at?
city of Russellville.
Unfortunately, the era we're in with regulations and costs and everything, a rule of thumb today for most communities is $50 each side, so a total of $100. That's kind of average.
And I would say even if you say, this is a great idea, we love it, but we just don't want to take on the debt right now. We still need to get back to par on the expense side.
Yeah.
Because of what we're doing with that lead line issue, we don't know that we're not gonna be having to do something with water lines. We saw how they shifted that expense onto the city, to do that. And so what I don't wanna get is, we can't we can't even decide it's producing revenue, we can't even do anything because we're using it to pay, to subsidize the side that's not.
I don't disagree with raising rates, but I don't like these rates so quickly. I understand we're under some deadlines, but that's gonna be a shock to a lot of people.
Well, I don't disagree. I mean, and I don't know, like I say, because if I understood you right, while they could require that CPI escalator, it doesn't sound like they have to if you have your house in order on the front end. If they, because what I would like to offer is on the backside, I know we've got excess Fund 20 capital improvement money, and that if they need to make something up, we take that out of Fund 20 and use that to offset versus putting a constant.
Yeah, I
exposure.
haven't yet gotten into a situation, to be completely honest, where I've had a city or a district going through the state revolving fund program that has been in a situation where they didn't need to raise rates. So my hope would be, yes, if you have your house in order, that there are a little more.
Yeah, we get the rates, we'll front load the rate increase
Right.
and get that done. Like I mentioned to you, if we could start with our fiscal year in September, get that in place, because I believe we couldn't start construction probably until this time next year, best case.
Right.
That would give us 6 to 7 months of new money coming in and kind of letting us get on top of it, so that when we go to the lower, going to the banks, we got cash on hand that hopefully would, one, help us leverage interest rates and maybe take some of the covenants down, just to certain what we need to do.
Certainly.
Any other questions? I'm not asking you to vote tonight, I just need to get this in front of you and get the discussion going and get.
What are we looking at?
I would like to have this, I mean, I'd like to be able to have it to where we could get this, you know, whatever the increase is, assuming that we, again, you guys, I don't get to vote on that unless it's a tie. But assuming that you think that there's something worthwhile, I'd like to have it to where we could have that go live in September, so that we would match it up with the budget year and what have you, but yeah, I would say probably the latest 1st of July. I mean, I don't want anybody to feel railroaded that we're not giving it time to think, but the numbers probably are not gonna change for the better. So it's just a matter of which chief you want to take it out of, and it's gonna be a fight.
Unfortunately.
So gentlemen, I thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you.
And they did graciously, Mr. Benson brought the Charlie Zednick cookies,
Oh, yeah.
so I know Jimmy got one, but it's didn't like one.
That probably left over.
And any staff members as well.
They look hungry, they're in overtime. So, next up, elected official comments. Any comments?
Well, looks like we may have some vehicles on the road, chief.
We're getting there.
And we got one, but I see, Joe's driving one.
Oh,
Joe's driving my old one and I'm
Oh,
driving
that's
one.
where that came from.
I thought it was survivability.
I like with the police license plates that people pull over.
We had one of those guys.
You got to get hazard duty paid just to drive here right now.
I'd like to again thank Mr. Ross, Mr. Benson for your time this evening coming out, and the public who gave us their time to be informed, and I want to say all the staff. So if we have nothing else, I'd take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We stand adjourned.